Imagine it is a Saturday morning and you are in the kind of secondhand bookshop that smells like old paper and the particular silence of things that have already been loved. The light comes through a tall window at the kind of angle that makes ordinary dust visible and golden, that makes the quiet inside the shop feel almost deliberate. You are not there because you need something specific. You are there because this is one of the places where you have always felt most like yourself, surrounded by other people's words, in no hurry, accountable to no one, in no performance. You pull a book from a shelf, not because the title caught your eye right away, but because something about its weight, its worn spine, the small dignity of its presence on a crowded shelf, reached something in you. You read the first page standing up, in the way that people read when they are genuinely absorbed rather than just performing the act of reading. And for a moment the whole shop falls away and there is only the words and the thing in you that the words are touching. A man nearby, late 60s, solid, a man whose face has the particular quality that arrives only after a person has lived through enough to stop needing to pretend about it, has been watching you for longer than he realized. He noticed you not when you walked in, but when you stopped, when you pulled that book from the shelf and were so completely, genuinely present to your own experience that you forgot, for just a moment, to monitor how you appeared from the outside. There is something in that, in being so entirely real to your own moment, that the performance of yourself becomes temporarily unnecessary, that stops people. It stopped him. Later, if you spoke, he would reach for language he does not quite have, because what he noticed is not easily named. He would tell you, circling it with the honest imprecision of a man genuinely trying to articulate something he felt before he understood it, that he noticed the way you were with yourself, that you seemed to require nothing from the room around you, that you were simply, completely, unhurriedly there, and that he had not, in a very long time, been in the presence of someone who gave him that particular feeling, the feeling that here was a person who actually inhabited her own life. This is what this conversation is about today. Not how to seem more attractive, not how to present yourself differently, not a strategy or a technique or a formula imported from a world that still believes attraction is primarily a matter of surfaces and signals and well-timed impressions. This is about something that is already living inside you, something you have been building through every chapter of your life, the beautiful ones and the brutal ones equally, and sometimes more in the brutal ones than in any other. Something that the women in your stage of life who seem most fully alive, most genuinely compelling, most completely themselves, have learned to stop hiding. And what I want to tell you before we go any further is this. By the time this conversation ends, I believe something in you is going to settle. Not dramatically, not in a way that announces itself, but quietly, the way something settles when you finally recognize a truth you were already circling, when you hear something said clearly that you were already, on some level, beginning to know. Let's begin. When you ask emotionally mature men over 65 to be genuinely honest, not about what they think they should say, but about what is actually true for them, about what draws them toward a woman at this stage of life, the answers tend to cluster around something that surprises most people until, on reflection, it doesn't surprise them at all. It is not youth. Men of this age and this level of self-awareness have long since made their peace with their own relationship to time. They are not searching for someone who makes them feel like they have recovered their 30s. That desire belongs to a different kind of man, one who is running from something rather than towards something, and the emotionally honest ones know it. It is not a particular body type or look. These things are noticed. Any person with eyes and a functioning heart notices the appearance of another. But when you ask these men to describe what actually stays with them, what makes them want to call again, what makes a particular woman different from the others, what makes the drive home interesting, they do not lead with appearance. What they lead with is something closer to this. The feeling that this woman was genuinely, completely herself, that she was not performing, that she was not waiting for anything from the encounter to confirm something she was not yet sure of, that being with her was different from being with most people, because she was actually there in a way that most people at most moments are not. The word I want to offer you for this quality, and I want you to sit with it as we move through the rest of this conversation, is wholeness, not perfection, not the completion of a project or the achievement of some flawless state, but the sense of a woman who has gathered herself across all the years she has lived, who has collected the complicated, costly, irreplaceable pieces of who she actually is, and who stands in that gathering as someone genuinely, recognizably, completely at home in herself. This is what draws people, men over 65 inches particular, because they have lived long enough to understand the difference between wholeness and its performance, to know how rare the real thing is, and to know in their bodies exactly what it costs to spend years in the company of its absence. And the most important thing, the thing I need you to understand before anything else, is that you are not starting from zero. You have been building this your entire life. Through every year, every loss, every chapter that remade you, every morning you chose to stay present to your own life when something easier was available. The question is not whether you have wholeness to offer. The question is simply whether you are letting it be visible. We are going to look at this through 6 specific dimensions, 6 qualities that wholeness produces in how a woman moves through the world. And by the end of this, I hope you will recognize yourself in each of them, not as goals you have not yet reached, but as honest descriptions of who you have been becoming for a very long time. The first dimension, the first quality, the foundational one, the ground under everything else, is one that most women in their 60s have been waiting, in some quiet part of themselves, their whole lives to claim, even though no one ever told them they were allowed to. It is the willingness to take up your actual space, not loudly, not with the exhausting, look at me quality that is sometimes mistaken for confidence, but your actual space, the space that belongs to a woman of your particular experience, your depth, your specific and irreplaceable view of the world, occupied, simply, without the habitual, reflexive contraction that so many women carry so automatically they no longer feel it as contraction at all. It has simply become the shape of being them. Think about what the world asked of you across the first several decades of your life. It asked you to fit, to read the room and match it, to arrive not as yourself, but as a version of yourself calibrated to what the room could comfortably hold. It asked you to frame your needs as requests, your opinions as tentative suggestions that might well be wrong, your certainty as a posture that could probably stand some softening. It asked you to defer a little more often than felt right, to laugh a little more readily than was always genuine, to explain yourself more than was ever necessary, to make sure the space you occupied was never quite enough to make anyone uncomfortable. And here is what I want to say carefully, because it matters. You were not wrong to have done this. You were not weak. The ability to read a room, to calibrate yourself to it, to manage the social temperature, this was a form of intelligence. In many contexts, it was a form of care. In some contexts, it was a form of survival. The cost of not doing it was sometimes real, and you were not foolish to avoid it. But it had its own cost. A cost that has been compounding quietly across decades in ways you may not have fully tallied. The cost of arriving in room after room as a slightly managed, slightly edited, slightly contracted version of yourself. The cost of your own visibility. The cost of people who might have genuinely wanted to know you, including men who might have genuinely valued what you had to offer, never quite seeing who you actually are, because you were always slightly pre-adjusting before you let them look. At some point, and for many women, this tipping point arrives somewhere in the geography of their 60s. Though its timing is different for every person, the calculation changes. The accommodation that once felt like grace starts to feel like erosion. The shrinking that once felt diplomatic begins to feel like slow disappearance. And something in a woman moves. Quietly, often without drama. But it moves. She starts saying the thing she actually thinks. She stops offering extensive paragraphs of justification every time she says no to something. She stops arriving pre-shaped into whatever the room has decided it needs her to be and simply arrives herself in her full and specific weight. And something extraordinary follows. The people around her are drawn to her more, not despite this shift, because of it. Why does this quality matter so specifically to men over 65? Because a man who has genuinely lived that long has developed a sensitivity through loss, through relationship, through the accumulating evidence of his own choices and their consequences to the difference between a real person and a performed one. He has been in relationships where both people were operating as versions of themselves that did not quite match who they actually were. He knows the peculiar loneliness that lives inside that kind of connection, the intimacy that is technically present but somehow not landing, the real conversation that never quite begins because both people are operating slightly behind their own faces. What he wants, what he genuinely and sometimes urgently wants at this stage, is not a role or a performance or a carefully curated impression. He wants a person, someone whose presence is not an audition, someone complete enough in herself that being with her is an experience of genuine encounter rather than careful management. There is a distinction here that I want to hold clearly because it matters more than almost anything else we will talk about today. There is a profound and felt difference between a woman who wants connection and a woman who needs it in order to feel real, between a woman who would genuinely enjoy sharing her life with someone and a woman whose sense of her own validity is contingent on someone choosing to be there. Between an open door and a hunger, men over 65 feel that difference almost immediately, not because they are running a checklist, but because the emotional atmosphere created by need is experienced rather than evaluated. It creates a subtle but persistent weight in an encounter, an implicit requirement that he be the source of something she has not yet found a way to generate in herself. The woman who has reclaimed her actual space does not carry that particular weight into a room. She is present in her own life in a way that does not require him to make it real for her. She is there because she is genuinely interested in being there. And the freedom that gives him the freedom to simply be with someone without the low hum of being needed is one of the most profound things another person can offer at this stage of life. You have been taking up less space than you are owed for a very long time. The space is yours. It always was. The shift now is simply deciding to stop vacating it on reflex. Before we go further, drop a comment and tell me about your experience. Tell me when you first started taking up your space, or tell me where you are still working on it. Your story matters here, and it matters to every woman who will read it. The second dimension, the second quality, and one of the most quietly significant things about a woman to any man who has also done any real living, is the way she holds her own history. Every woman who has arrived at 60 or beyond is carrying a narrative of genuine breadth and complexity, years of love and love's particular complications, the specific grief of losing people who made you who you are, chapters that still feel unresolved, that you visit at odd hours without quite meaning to, mistakes you carry more quietly than you let on, strengths you discovered only because softer options were no longer available, losses that arrived without warning and rewrote the story of who you thought you were going to be. This history is not a liability. It is not something to overcome or minimize or carefully meter out in strategically appropriate quantities. It is the full and complex and genuinely remarkable record of a human life lived in earnest. But the way it is held, the specific and internal relationship a woman has with her own past, is among the most revealing things about her. And among the things that men who have also survived their own difficult chapters respond to most immediately. Some women carry their history as evidence, as proof of what was done to them, what went wrong, what the world still owes them in restitution. They do not do this consciously or with any intent to burden anyone. The pain is entirely real, and the compassion owed to it is not small. But the effect of this carrying, the atmosphere it creates around them, is heavy and contracted. It signals, in ways they do not intend, that the past is still actively happening, that old chapters are still being written, that the space available for something genuinely new is already occupied by the ongoing demands of something old. Other women carry their history as something to be concealed, who have decided consciously or not that the complicated parts of their past are liabilities to be hidden, things that will make them less easy, less appealing, less deserving of good things ahead. They sanitize their story, present a smoother and less accurate version of it, and in doing so become, paradoxically, less interesting and less real than they actually are. The version of themselves on display is safer. It is also a ghost. And then there is the woman who carries her history the way a person carries a life, with full acknowledgement of its weight, with honest respect for everything it contains, without pretending the hard chapters were easy, and without defining herself exclusively through their darkness. She has sat with her own story long enough to have developed what I can only describe as a relationship with it. She knows what happened. She knows what it cost her and what it made of her. And she has arrived through time and reflection and whatever form of reckoning was available to her at a place where the story belongs to her without being all of her. This woman can tell you about what she has been through without making you responsible for it. She can describe grief without asking you to fix it. She can speak about the years that were hard with the kind of self-awareness that signals clearly, I have been in that territory. I know it well, and it is not the only territory I inhabit. Men over 65 respond to this with a depth that sometimes surprises the women who carry it, because these men have their own chapters, their own quiet reckonings, their own losses that redefined what they thought they were capable of handling. When they meet a woman who has been through genuine difficulty and has come through it with her curiosity still open, her warmth still present, her capacity for wonder still intact, they feel something that is very close to recognition. Not the comfortable recognition of similarity, but the rarer and more significant recognition of someone who has been in winter too, who knows from the inside what surviving winter actually requires. That recognition is not a small thing. It is the beginning of something real, not the beginning of a carefully managed courtship performance, but the actual beginning of two people who have both lived enough to have stopped pretending, sitting across from each other and deciding whether what they find is worth knowing better. Your history is not your damage. It is your depth. It is not a wound to be displayed or a secret to be concealed. It is evidence, rich and specific and hard-won, of a life genuinely and fully lived. When you carry it that way, with clear eyes rather than averted ones, openly but not heavily, you become someone that a man who has also genuinely lived cannot easily look away from. The third dimension. The third quality sounds simple when I name it, and turns out, when you sit with it, to be among the rarest things one person can offer another. It is genuine curiosity, the kind that is not performed, not managed, not motivated by the need to appear interested or to obtain a particular response offered freely, without agenda, without the background program of monitoring whether it is being returned. Let me tell you what this is not. It is not the performance of interest. The way a person asks questions because it seems like what good listeners do, or because it is their turn in the back and forth, or because they have been told that people respond well to feeling seen, that kind of attention is a social technique. It is experienced as exactly that, warm in the way that any skilled performance can be warm, but not quite landing, not quite reaching the part of a person where something real gets touched. True curiosity, the unmanaged, genuinely wanting to know kind, is experienced differently. When someone is actually curious about you, actually present to you, asking because your answer matters to them rather than because asking is the move, listening because what you say genuinely interests them rather than because they are waiting for their opening, you feel it in a way that is almost impossible to describe, but immediately and viscerally recognizable. It is warming in a way that cannot be replicated by any performance of warmth. It makes you want to say more than you planned. It makes you feel, for the duration of that encounter, like you are genuinely worth being present with. What makes this quality so specifically powerful in a self-possessed woman is the pairing, the conjunction that changes everything. She is genuinely, fully curious about the person across from her, and she is not running any anxiety in the background about whether they find her interesting. She is not monitoring his reactions. She is not calculating whether she has said too much or not enough. She is not running a continuous self-assessment program while simultaneously trying to be present to someone else. She is simply interested in him, in what he thinks and has seen and lived and chosen and regrets and loves, in what matters to him, in who he is. This sounds straightforward. It is not. For women who have spent decades managing their social presence, who have learned through very real experience that how they were received in a room had real consequences, the act of turning that management program off and simply being curious is almost radical. The habit of performance is deeply installed. The reflex of self-monitoring runs fast and quiet. Choosing not to run it requires at first a conscious and repeated return to a simpler question. What am I actually curious about right now? But the effect of making that choice when the program quiets and the curiosity is real is extraordinary in its impact on the person receiving it. Think about what it means to a man in his late 60s who has been on enough dates to have become familiar with the particular texture of managed social performance to encounter someone who is simply actually present to him, who asks about something he mentioned because she genuinely wants to know more, who hears something he says and pursues it because it caught her attention, who is not running any agenda about where this is going or what she needs it to produce, who is simply there with him in the conversation because she is genuinely interested in what the conversation contains. He feels it, not as a thought, but as a physical experience. The experience of being actually met by another person, not assessed, not managed, not reflected back at a calculated angle designed to produce a particular response in him, but simply and honestly seen. And he does not forget it. He cannot, because what he was given in that conversation is one of the most fundamentally human things available. The experience of mattering to someone who had nothing to gain from caring. I want to say something directly to you here, because I think it matters, and I think you need to hear it stated plainly. If you have ever sat across from someone you hope to connect with and spent the whole conversation divided, half present to them, half inside your own head, monitoring, calculating, assessing how it was going, I want you to know that was not a character failing. It was a habit installed through years of living in situations where how you came across genuinely affected what happened next. You learned to manage yourself because the world taught you that your reception was worth protecting. But that habit is costing you the very thing it was designed to help you get, and it can be unlearned, not by effort, not by trying harder to be present, but by coming back again and again to the simplest question: what am I actually curious about right now? What do I genuinely want to know? When you lead from genuine curiosity rather than managed presentation, you stop being a person running a program and become a person making real contact. And in a world saturated with programs, real contact is electric. If this conversation is touching something true in you, please share it with a woman who needs to hear it today. You may not know exactly who she is, but I think you probably sense her. The fourth dimension. The fourth quality is one that tends to be misunderstood in both directions, either overstated into a kind of rigid stoicism that has nothing to do with genuine inner life, or understated into a kind of flatness that mistakes the absence of feeling for the mastery of it. And it is also the quality that I believe women who have lived through difficulty possess in greater measure than they typically know. I call it emotional sovereignty. What it is not. The tight, controlled, never let them see anything composure that some women develop as protective armor, that version maintaining a polished, unruffled exterior regardless of what is happening on the inside is not sovereignty, it is a wall. And a wall, however impeccably maintained, broadcasts one clear message to anyone who comes close enough to feel it. I am not available to be truly known. Armor is not wholeness, it is its opposite. It is the settlement a woman arrives at when she has decided, from exhaustion, from experience, from pain that was too costly to keep risking, that allowing anyone genuine access to her interior is more dangerous than the isolation of remaining perfectly defended. The cost of that settlement is presence, the particular warmth that belongs only to someone who is genuinely and visibly affected by being alive. Real emotional sovereignty is something altogether different and considerably more difficult to arrive at. It is the capacity to feel the full range of what a life brings grief in its actual weight, not the socially acceptable approximation of it. Joy that is genuinely felt rather than performed. Anger that is clean and direct rather than suppressed into something apologetic and small. Fear that is acknowledged rather than denied. Love and longing and the specific, particular ache of things that did not go the way you hoped, all of it. The full spectrum without being governed by any of it. To be moved without being swept away. To be affected without being destabilized. To have feelings without becoming them, without needing someone else to contain them or talk you down from them or take responsibility for resolving them. To be fully present to your own emotional world without making that world into the weather that everyone else in the room must navigate. A woman with emotional sovereignty can be brought to tears by something genuinely beautiful and feel no shame in it. She can speak about something painful without turning it into a crisis that requires management. She can be properly, cleanly angry, not the qualified, quickly suppressed, carefully apologized for version, and when the moment is right, speak from that anger with clarity and directness rather than combustion. She can be disappointed without collapsing. She can be delighted without performing delight. She can hold weather in her interior life without either denying the weather or becoming it. She has, through all the years of her living, developed a relationship with her own emotional world that is neither denial nor captivity. She can inhabit whatever is actually present inside her while simultaneously remaining, underneath it all, herself. The feelings are real. And she is also real, distinct from them, not extinguished by them. This is emotional maturity in the truest and most embodied sense. And it is profoundly attractive to men who have lived long enough to know from direct and sometimes costly personal experience what the absence of it extracts from a relationship over time. Let me be specific, because specific things are more useful than general ones. A man in his late 60s who has lived with genuine attention to his own experience has developed, through repetition and consequence, a sensitivity to the emotional atmosphere of an encounter. Not through conscious evaluation, he is not sitting across a dinner table with a checklist, but through the accumulated attentiveness of someone who has paid attention to what things feel like in his own life, he senses things quickly and accurately. He notices whether a moment of silence is comfortable or creates a visible anxiety that must immediately be filled. He notices what happens in a woman's face when a conversation touches something mildly complex, whether she contracts, deflects, becomes slightly brittle, or remains simply and openly herself. He notices whether warmth is genuine or performed, whether laughter has real air in it, whether being with her feels spacious or managed, whether he can afford to say something true or whether a faint but persistent sense of fragility around her means he must be perpetually careful. What he is feeling for, without necessarily naming it, is ground. The sense that this woman has a floor beneath her that belongs to her, that she does not require him to be her stability, that whatever this life brings into the room, she will not shatter, and she will not require him to have prevented the shattering, because he has been, at various points, the person providing that floor for someone who did not have her own, and he knows what it costs. He knows it in the particular tiredness that lives in the bones of someone who has spent years in low-level bracing, never quite sure what unexpected moment might require him to stabilize something. And he knows, with the equal and opposite certainty, what it would feel like to simply not have to brace. The woman with emotional sovereignty does not ask him to be her floor. She has her own. And that means he can simply be with her, not managing her, not monitoring her edges, not carefully choosing his words, just with her. The relief of that, to a man of this age, is profound and not trivial. You have been building emotional sovereignty your entire life, through every moment of sitting with something that felt unbearable and discovering it was barely bearable. Through every grief you moved through rather than permanently around. Through every morning you chose to stay present to your own life rather than going numb. That building is real. That ground is under your feet. Let people feel it beneath them when they stand near you. The fifth dimension. The fifth quality is one that makes women of your generation smile when I name it often with a kind of wry, immediate recognition, as if I have just described something they gave away so quietly and so long ago they had nearly forgotten it was theirs to begin with. It is this: knowing your own mind, and saying so, not in an aggressive way, not with the combative edge of someone who has confused having convictions with needing to win against the people who hold different ones, but with the particular ease of a woman who has lived long enough, who has paid enough attention, made enough observations, survived enough chapters to have formed a genuine, specific, genuinely hers view of the world, and who no longer requires the room's agreement before she shares it. Think about what women of your generation were consistently trained to do in social situations across most of their adult lives. Sense the consensus first, speak only into safe air, frame any departure from prevailing mood as a tentative question rather than a confident position. Add the ritual softening. I might be completely wrong about this, but before statements that are perfectly clear and do not need softening at all. Monitor the room before you open your mouth, and if the room seems uncertain, soften further. Make sure your opinion arrives in a package that cannot possibly be mistaken for a challenge, because a challenge might cost something, and the cost might be more than you can afford. This was not weakness. It was a form of social intelligence applied to a world in which women's opinions were received, in many rooms and many decades, with a particular impatience that men's identical opinions were not. You read the landscape accurately. You responded accordingly. You protected what needed protecting. But it has a very specific effect. It renders the woman wearing it invisible in a particular way. Not absent, she is still there, still speaking, still participating. But the participation is pre-filtered, pre-approved. And the pre-approved version, however socially smooth, does not cause the person across from her to put down his fork mid-sentence because something she just said stopped him in the middle of a thought. A woman with a real, unhedged, honestly held opinion is something different from that. She is the specific note in a conversation that changes its key. She is the one who says something that makes the man across from her genuinely stop and think for a moment, reconsider something he thought was settled, look at something familiar from an angle he had not considered. She is, in the most useful sense, interesting. She is not provocative. She does not argue for the pleasure of argument. She simply has a view of the book she finished last week, of the way something in the culture has shifted in ways she finds either fascinating or troubling, of a choice someone made that struck her as either courageous or misguided, of what she believes actually matters in a life, and what she suspects is mostly comfortable noise, and she shares it. Not because she needs to convince anyone, not because she requires agreement to feel secure in her position, but because it is true for her, and she has stopped making her truth something that must be pre-approved before it is spoken. The effect of this on a man over 65 who is still intellectually alive, and there are considerably more such men than women sometimes expect, is quietly extraordinary. He has been to enough polite evenings. He knows the particular flatness of a conversation that goes nowhere, that takes no risks, that costs nothing from either participant and deposits nothing in return. He has experienced too many social encounters that left him exactly where he arrived, having exchanged comfortable sounds with someone who was also exchanging comfortable sounds, both of them performing the approximate shape of connection without quite making it. A woman who has something real to say is not a difficulty. She is an event. She is the reason the evening goes somewhere interesting. She is the reason he thinks about the conversation afterward, brings it up to someone else the following week, finds himself still turning over something she said 3 days later. She is the reason, on the most fundamental level, that meeting her was worth the meeting. Your opinions are not random or unearned. They are the accumulated, specific, irreplaceable product of 60 or more years of paying close attention to people, to events, to the way the world works and often fails to work, to what has mattered in your own life, and what turned out to be noise. They are the view from exactly where you have stood. No one else has stood there. No one else sees quite what you see from that particular vantage point. Say what you see. Hold your ground with warmth rather than rigidity, but hold it. Let the room hear what you actually think. Because a room in which one more woman is carefully performing agreement is a room with one less real person in it, and the world has quite enough managed agreement. If this is your first time finding Silent Resonance, welcome. Subscribe and stay. This conversation gets richer the more honest voices join it, and yours belongs here. The sixth dimension. The sixth quality is the one that contains all the others. The foundation beneath everything we have built today. The root system of the whole structure. And it is, in equal measure, the most difficult to arrive at, and the most transforming once you genuinely have. It is the quality of living from a sense of your own fullness, rather than from the hunger for someone else to fill what feels incomplete. I want to take real time with this, because the way it is usually said leaves something essential out, and what it usually leaves out is the part that actually matters. Every woman has known, at some point in her life, the particular and vertiginous feeling of needing to be chosen. The specific, waiting anxiety of not knowing whether he will call, whether he finds her worth pursuing, whether the way she laughed or looked or spoke across a room was enough to earn something she needed from him. The way that waiting shapes her makes her smaller, more careful, more prone to editing herself in the direction of whatever she imagines he wants to see. The way her behavior in the encounter is quietly organized around a single question she cannot bring herself to ask directly. Am I enough? This is not a character flaw. It is the inheritance of a romantic culture that has told women, with consistency across many generations, that their value is established by being chosen. That to be loved is to be confirmed. That a woman unpaired is a woman waiting. That the whole measure of her desirability is a function of whether it has been verified by someone else's selection. This was always wrong. It was wrong when it was stated explicitly, and it has not improved for being absorbed into the quieter, subtler social atmosphere where it is simply assumed rather than announced. But so many women have lived inside it for so long, have organized so many of their choices and desires and self-assessments around it, that setting it down is not a single decision. It is a practice. A slow, ongoing, sometimes unglamorous work of reclaiming the authority to know their own worth without requiring external certification. The women who have done that work, or who are genuinely in the middle of it, carry themselves differently. And the difference is felt immediately by the people around them, including men who have enough self-awareness to notice. A woman whose sense of her own value is contingent on being chosen enters every interaction with an invisible weight on the encounter. She needs it to go well, not just enjoyably, but in a specific way that produces a specific feeling in her. She needs him to like her. She needs the conversation to move toward a particular outcome, or she will interpret its absence as confirmation of something she was already afraid was true about herself. This need, however invisible she believes it to be, However carefully she has learned to conceal, it is palpable. It shapes the quality of everything. The way she laughs, the things she allows herself to say, the parts of herself she quietly edits because they might not be to his taste. It makes her, without her knowing it, a slightly smaller version of herself than she actually is. And a man of genuine emotional maturity can feel this within minutes of meeting her. He does not judge her for it, but he feels the weight of what he is implicitly being asked to provide, which is her confirmation, her proof, the external evidence she needs that she is enough, and that weight, over time, becomes something a healthy person cannot carry without being diminished by the carrying. Now imagine the woman who lives from her own fullness. She has chosen herself, not in a grand, declarative, one-time ceremony of self-affirmation, but in the quiet, ongoing, sometimes painstaking practice of deciding on the basis of everything she has lived and survived and learned and built and lost and recovered that she is worth knowing, worth being present with, worth the space she takes up and the care she brings and the complexity she carries. She has made this decision on ordinary mornings and in long nights of difficult reckoning and in all the unremarkable moments between, until it is no longer a decision she makes consciously, but a ground she simply stands on. From that ground, she enters every encounter differently. She is not there to be confirmed. She is curious, genuinely, freely curious about whether this is a person she wants in her world. She is asking herself questions about him, not only questions about how she is coming across to him. She is evaluating, gently and with genuine openness, whether his presence adds something to her experience of being alive, whether this is someone who sees the world in ways that interest her, whether being with him would require her to be less than she is or would invite her to be more. She is, in the most complete sense, a subject in her own story, not an object in his. The man across from her feels none of the weight he has come to expect from these encounters. He feels, instead, something very close to spaciousness. He is not managing anything. He is not bracing against the potential consequences of a wrong word. He is not carrying the implicit weight of her self-worth in his hands and trying not to drop it. He is simply with her, free to be entirely himself, free to be curious, free to decide whether this person is someone he wants to know better, without feeling that his decision carries her sense of her own validity along with it. He does not want to leave, not because she has engineered anything to keep him, but because she is simply, entirely, genuinely herself, and being entirely oneself, in a world that asks everyone to be managed and performed and strategic, is one of the most unforgettable things a person can be. I want to speak to you directly now, as plainly as I know how. You may still be carrying, in some quiet interior corner, the belief that the most attractive version of you is a simpler one, a less complicated one, a lighter freighted, fewer chapters, more easily managed one, a version of you that requires less of the people who encounter her, that takes up less cognitive and emotional space, that is more accommodating of whatever the situation needs her to be. That belief was not born in you. It was installed carefully, repeatedly, by a culture that found it genuinely useful to have women uncertain of their own worth, and that found compliant uncertainty considerably more convenient than the alternative. It is not a truth about you. It is a story told about you from the outside by forces that had no particular interest in your full becoming. You are allowed to put it down. The woman in the bookshop at the beginning of this conversation, so present to her own experience, so unhurried in her own life, so completely herself that the performance of herself had temporarily become unnecessary, was not compelling despite her age and her history and the full complexity of who she had become. She was compelling because of all of it, because she had arrived. Because she had, through every hard and beautiful and ordinary year of her actual life, built the thing that cannot be imitated or performed or acquired through any shortcut, herself. And that self at 60 and beyond whole and present and entirely real, is one of the most remarkable things in any room it enters. There is a particular morning that comes to a woman somewhere in the later chapters of her life. It does not announce itself. It does not arrive with ceremony or revelation or any marking significant enough that she knows to pay attention. It comes quietly, usually unremarkably a morning like other mornings in its details, but different in some quality she cannot immediately name. She wakes up and notices that something has changed in the quality of her interior silence. The low, persistent background monitoring that she has been carrying so long, she stopped registering it as noise. The surveillance of, am I enough? Am I doing this right? Am I taking up too much space or not enough? Am I being too much or not quite enough of something has gone quiet? Not permanently. Not in a way that means she will never again feel uncertain or question herself or wish she had handled something differently, but quiet enough that she can hear, underneath it, something else. Something older, steadier, and more genuinely hers. This is not the peace of someone who has given up. That peace, if peace is even the word, is a kind of foreclosure, a closing of accounts, a decision made in exhaustion or disappointment that expecting less is safer than hoping for more. What this is, this quiet, unremarkable, ordinary feeling morning shift, is something altogether more alive. It is the peace of a woman who has finally, fully arrived inside her own life, who is no longer standing in it with one foot while the other reaches backward toward an unlived version of the past, or forward toward a future in which she will finally be allowed to relax into herself, who is here, now, as she is, with everything she has accumulated and survived and become, and who has decided quietly, without requiring anyone's permission, to decide that here and now, and as she is, constitutes more than enough. This woman is not finished. She is not done wanting things or reaching toward things or building things. She is simply doing all of that from a place that does not tremble when the outcomes are uncertain. She has found the ground, the actual, solid, entirely hers ground that was underneath all the performance and accommodation and careful management of impression all along. And she has stopped looking for it anywhere other than where it actually lives, inside herself. The 6 dimensions we talked about today, taking up your actual space, carrying your history with dignity, offering genuine curiosity without agenda, living from emotional sovereignty, speaking your actual mind, and drawing your sense of worth from your own fullness rather than from someone else's confirmation. These are not 6 separate qualities. They are 6 windows into the same room, the room where a woman who has genuinely lived takes up residence in herself and decides, without drama and without requiring anyone's blessing, to stay. You have paid for that room. With years you gave to other people's needs, with losses that arrived without permission and remade you, with mornings you got through when you did not know beforehand that you would, with the version of yourself you left behind in chapters that did not deserve to keep her. The payment is done. The room is yours. The only thing that remains is the willingness to actually move in. Men over 65 who are looking for something real, who are past the performance and the carefully maintained impression, who know from long experience what genuine presence feels like because they have known its absence, can sense this room in a woman. They sense it in the quality of her attention, in the ease with which she says something and means it, in the particular warmth of a person who is not trying to be anything other than what she is. And when they sense it, they do not want to leave, because there is nothing more compelling at any age, in any room, than being in the company of someone who is entirely and quietly and unmistakably themselves. You are that woman. You have been becoming her for a very long time. The most important thing that remains is simply to let yourself know it, and to walk through the door of your own life, your own space, your own complete and sufficient self, without waiting for someone else to hold it open for you first. That is the truth you get to live in now. Carry it with you wherever you go. Let people feel it when they stand near you. You have earned that. You have more than earned it. If this conversation added something real to your understanding of yourself today, if something here touched something true, something you have been close to knowing for a while, I would love for you to like this video. That small action tells the world that this kind of conversation matters, and it does matter. Leave a comment below and tell me which of the 6 dimensions spoke to you most. Tell me where you are in your own journey toward wholeness. Tell me what you have already claimed and what you are still reaching toward. Your voice in this community is not decoration. It is the whole point of why this space exists. If you know a woman who needs any part of what we talked about today, a friend, a sister, someone who is in the middle of figuring out who she is now, who she is allowed to be, what she is allowed to expect, please share this with her. You may not know exactly how close she is to this understanding, but I think you probably have a sense. Trust it. And if you are not yet part of this community, I want to warmly invite you. This is Silent Resonance, where we go beneath the surface of ordinary life and take seriously the extraordinary fact of being a woman who has genuinely lived and is still choosing to. Subscribe and stay. The conversation here only gets deeper. I will see you in the next one.